In episode 27, we met Betsy Lambert, a woman whose brush with death sent her on a path to becoming an energy healer. In this episode, we'll hear from a man whose life path was far different, but also led to healing. His journey took him to a place many have heard of, but few understand: the library of the Akashic Records. Welcome to the Peep Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Maroc, and on this episode, we're talking with Smith Primm. Smith is a talented artist with an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, which has led him to an avocation he never expected. His story is fascinating, and he tells it better than I could. So without further ado, let's dive in with Smith. Hi, Smith. How are you doing today?
I am well. Good evening, Nikki.
I would love it if we start off by your giving a little bit of your background and tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Okay, great. Well, I'm Smith Primm. Live here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm from North Carolina. I was born in Rockingham, grew up in Greensboro, and moved to Raleigh around 1987. I was always, in my younger years, always interested in art. And so I started out as a painter in junior high school, and then I got in photography. And I made it out of, once I graduated from high school, I went to Western Carolina University as an art major. And so I went in as a painter, and my painting was evolving into more sculpture. So I got involved in sculpture, and then I discovered this program at Western Carolina University. They had a glass blowing program. And so I got involved in blowing glass. And I liked working with metals, and I enjoyed the colors, which were the colors in glass are metallic oxides that are introduced into in different ways into the glass. But I was interested in combining metals and glass. And I had been working with flat metal, and it's very difficult you beat it into shapes, and then you can combine it with your sculpture work. But I needed an easier way because I'm not going to say I was lazy, but I wanted an easier way to combine my metals and my glass. So I did some research on electroplating and electroforming, and I discovered a way to coat my glass with a metallic paint and then build up a thickness of metal through an electroforming process, which is not a hot metal process. It's just a cold vat of metallic salts in a bath that you run electricity through. So the interesting part about that is like, where did that come from? Well, that came from after I had been hit by a car at the age of 21. I was just walking across the street, and I got hit by a van from behind. That could have been the end of it for me. I never would have known any different. But after that experience, and I was in college at the time, I had to take a break from college just to kind of get healed up for a semester. But there was no significant damage. We hope. Here I am. But it was sort of an awakening, because all of a sudden I knew that I had to get busy doing stuff. I mean, and so when I went back to school, that's when I got really busy, and this metallic process, this electroforming process was a product of taking a break and then coming back to school. And it was fantastic. Well, I got out of school, and I got married, and I went to work at a print shop, hand engraving printing plates. So it was really a far away place from what I had been doing in college. I was going to assume like the role of a husband and, with my college girlfriend. Well, that didn't last. And that relationship did not last. And I did end up staying as an engraver for a number of years, and I kind of evolved into a little bit more computer knowledge. I went back to school and I took every single computer class I could take just because I wanted to. There was no degree involved. I had my fine arts degree, but I wanted just to know. I said, I'm going to know these computers in, out, and roundabout. And I learned how to fix them, build them, program, just whatever I wanted to know, databases, and then also pursued my graphic arts. And so then I became a scanner operator who runs a high resolution drum scanner. And that's analyzing pictures, the highlight and shadows to do film separations for the printing industry. And then I moved to Raleigh and I became a vice president of a graphic arts company. I never thought that would ever happen to me. That is just like unbelievable. Here I was, just a little engraver, making my own blades and engraving plates, hand engraving printing plates. And you would think, man, that probably makes a lot of money. You barely make over minimum wage, right? It was just not that high paying a job. Things got better with graphic arts, and I'm still in graphic arts today. I work for a printing company, and I'm a color specialist. So I evaluate color, and I color calibrate machinery so that it can the machinery can match color across different devices. I do image retouching, so I'm involved in digital imaging. So that's that part. But along the way, I got married again, and my wife unfortunately passed away in 2007. That was a horrific thing. It was a sudden thing, and left me with 3 kids. And I'm blessed with my 3 sons, and I began to raise them. But I was thrown into, why am I here? Why did this happen to me? Right. And early on, back when I was 13, I had an interest in the Akashic Records. At that time, I was in, like middle school, I think is what it was. And I thought the Akashic Records, and there was a show called The Sixth Sense back then, I think, too. And I think they may have had a program on that. But I did some research back when I was 13 on the Akashic Records. And I thought, man, I got to know this. This is the knowledge of everything. If I know this, I will never have to study again. I'll just ask the Akashic Records and I can get the answers, right? And well, that didn't work as well as my dad's teacher's handbook. He was also a teacher in middle school. So was my mom. She taught elementary school, but my dad had the book that had the answers to all the questions, the math problems. So I kind of like did a little cheating on my side, and I got called on it. But, that's not the Akashic Records. So the Akashic Records also, in general, will not help you pass tests. So I learned that at that age after, I kind of got in some trouble in my classes. But, I made it through all that. And then I found myself in that point in 2007, 2008, 2009. And I was somewhat lost. I was working as a salesman in an IT company, and I had this crystal, which I have here now. I had an armature made for it, and I had used this crystal. I became interested. I was so weak at that time; I could not even walk. I was hobbling around because my diet was so bad, and I had PTSD from my wife passing away. But I'm not trying to give you a cry story. This is where I was in life. Yeah. And I was struggling raising 3 kids, and I was looking for answers, and I was looking for energy, and I was journaling, and I was like, I've got to do something different. And I used this crystal, and this crystal was involved in me making $1 million. People at work, in my job, you didn't make $1 million. If you made $100,000, it was a banner, unbelievable year. That was a wonderful year. Well, had a customer that was regularly every 6 months was using up $500,000. And I said, and I told people, they said, why are you sending out so many quotes, Smith? And I said, I'm going to make $1 million. I was kind of, and they're like, yeah, sure. You're going to make $1 million. Right. Well, I kept this on my desk and I used it during my conversations with my customers. And lo and behold, one day a purchase order came into my inbox from my customer for $1 million. I've got it. I framed it and I'm like, here it is. Here's the $1 million. And, it was just, that's when I became convinced of, the power of crystals and the power of it's not that the crystal did it, the energy, it's maybe a point of focus. It's a transducer. It's just like an electrical circuit. It helps to raise the vibration of what your thoughts are and what your intentions are. So the crystal is not a magic crystal that I pray to. It's not like that at all. It's a point of focus. It is and it's a vibrational amplifier. So, and they use that in electrical circuits too. They use quartz crystals in electrical circuits to set a regular vibration so that the circuit can operate properly. But we're not going to have a discussion about electricity. And I did get an electrical certification in part of my pathway way back when. I was trying all kinds of things. I said, I'm going to learn about electricity. And I did. So that was a wonderful thing, but it didn't make me $1 million. And I didn't get that $1 million. I only got a little piece of it,
Right.
That's what you get in sales. So around 2009, I started pursuing meditation. And in that pursuit of meditation, I came across this. I had been seeing this signal, and I've been journaling since. I would journal when I was 18, but I started journaling again in 2007 after my wife passed. And in that journaling, I kept seeing the time stamp 11:11. I would wake up. I look at the clock. It's 11:11. It's always. I was like, my gosh, I was worn out, and I was like, I have got to find out what this means, right? And so I searched and searched, and one of the answers, and I came across many answers. One of the first and foremost answers was that it was a gateway. It was a symbol that you were passing through a gateway. And so that gateway was, in a sense, my awakening. And that is part of it. The second part of that led me to this one person, George Bernard. Now, he developed this meditation CD around the 11:11 that is related to the Akashic Records. And on that CD, it's only an audio CD, which I bought and I listened to, and I did the exercises. You create a garden in this meditation, and you create the plants in the garden. You create everything, and then you create this library. You go in this library, and in this library, there's a table, there's an elevator, there's a chalkboard, and what happens in the library is that your Akashic, the soul or the energy that you need to work with is brought to you. So this is a really key thing that I learned about the Akashic Records, is that I was not going to have to go and hang a shingle and go put ads in the paper. I didn't have to go chase people down to do the Akashic Records, because I really wasn't in any frame of mind to be doing any of that at that time. Mm-hmm. They will be brought to you. How will I know when I need to work with somebody? They will cross your path. They will be brought to you. And I was like, that's very interesting. So in the library, people are brought to you, and the souls are brought in the elevator, and that you work with them. And then when you're done, you kind of close that session, and then they go back to where they're supposed to be. And they could be, the way that George Bernard described it was, they could be aliens. It could be from another planet. You're a helper of those people. And so that was a great CD. It was a great learning experience, but it only took me so far. But I do remember that garden every single day. And the garden that was a creation of my own mind, it was a peaceful garden. and it's always a great way that I can enter into the connecting with the Akashic Records. So that's one of the ways the first way that I learned to connect with the Akashic Records was through a guided meditation. And I was telling you that there's more than one way to connect with them, and that was one way. So a couple of years later, I took up my meditation led me to Reiki, and began learning Reiki. I had I'm like, why am I learning Reiki? But I wanted meditation, right? And the person teaching the meditation also taught Reiki. So they said, why don't you take the Reiki 1 class? So I did. And then and being the person that I am about learning stuff, I took Reiki 2. Then why would I stop then? Right? I'm going to continue on.
Right.
And this is a couple of years process. This is not something you don't go and do it. It's not like going to the to Wake Tech or something like that. You take a 6-week class and then you get your certification. You have to learn it, then you have to practice it, then you have to come back and learn some more. So I attained that certification. And after that, I attained certification in archangelic light healing. So now I've got 2 certifications in healing people, right? And it's like, I didn't plan to heal people, right? And we're all along, you're healing people, you're doing sessions, you're working with people. And I wasn't like resentful of it. I was just like, well, this is good. I'm glad I'm helping people. That's a good thing. And I'm learning along the way. And then I had an opportunity to become a Melchizedek priest. And that was with Dan Chesbro, and he's coming back to this area too to do more ordinations. But that the Melchizedek priesthood was a support of my spiritual journey, which now I'm on a spiritual journey. I had no idea that was what was going to happen, and I continued on. And then I took my first class, or my first actual class, in the Akashic Records. And I took it with, my teacher was Christina Cross. She's out of Chicago. And she teaches from the Linda Howe book, the Linda Howe technique. And the Linda Howe technique is a pathway prayer process. And there's a prayer that you say in a certain way that you get connected to the records for the individual or for yourself. And I found out that it's about getting information, and it is the Akashic Records to the point of describing what the Akashic Records is. I can pass along a little bit of what's in my manual, but I'm not reading it word for word. But it comes from Sanskrit, and it means the primary substance. So that out of which things are formed. So that's everything. The Akash is everything. The first stage of the crystallization of the spirit. Now that's interesting. Crystals. There's crystals again. Mm-hmm. Crystallization of the spirit. So it's refinement. It's a quickening. I would use. It's the primary substance of exquisite fineness, and is so sensitive to the slightest vibrations of ether in any place of the universe. An indelible impression with an indelible impression. So it is I look at it as every living thing has a vibration from its beginning to its end. And that vibration, as you go through lifetimes of refinement, it is continued. Your vibration has a specific frequency, even though, and it goes through an evolution, but it's always you. And every living thing has a vibration. So every living thing has an Akashic record. So that is what the Akashic records are. Now, what was your next question to me?
Well, first, something you just said. So when you are studying the Akashic records, is there an acceptance of past lives, like multiple lives?
There is. Okay. I won't say that it's an absolute you must believe, but it will beg. It's the it will beg for that as an explanation for it. I would almost say that yes, it is. It's not a require. Nobody's going to require you to do anything,
right?
If you want to just talk about your Akashic records for this lifetime, then so be it. But in a bigger sense, there is it's a larger connectivity.
Okay. That was something I hadn't heard before. I only know a little bit about the Akashic Records because I went to a Body, Mind, Spirit Expo like 5 or 6 years ago, and they had somebody there doing, one of the sessions that they have all the little stages, and one of them did an Akashic Records meditation. And that was my experience. It was like 15 minutes. You did the meditation, and then she asked you a question like, did you feel it? That kind of thing. So it was enough to pique my interest, but not at the time. I didn't have time to really invest in anything. So there's always been a curiosity for me, but I haven't really studied it. So that's why I'm so interested to have you here sharing your story and what you've learned. Can you kind of give just a brief history of the Akashic Records? Like where does all of this come from?
Okay, sure. So where does it come from? Sanskrit is one of the areas it comes from. So it's ancient in that respect. Let me get my glasses. So as I had mentioned before, it comes from the Akasha is a Sanskrit word. So it comes from that far back in history. They refer to Enoch. So Enoch being the recorder of knowledge when he was alive, and then when he passed on, he evolved into one of the masters, as well as Metatron was a scribe performing his duty with absolute integrity. So these are the masters of the masters, teachers, and loved ones, are the people that you are the beings that you connect with through the Akashic records. And they may connect to you. They don't necessarily reveal themselves as this is who I am. They may, but it's not that they want to be regarded or idolized in that way. They are going to reveal themselves to you in a familiar way that you can understand what the message that they're trying to get across to you. And one of the things that is mostly that it requires is your openness or your belief in that it works. Okay, so this is a problem that I had from the beginning, the belief that it works. So I became advanced certified, because I took extra training in the Akashic Records with Christina Cross. And so we practiced it. I did some of it. I worked with people, and I was like, yeah, but how do I know this is true? How do I know this is true? Well, part of that comes from you have to have a certain level of faith. And so for me to have a level of faith, I have to have more understanding. And to gain more understanding, I have to be able to practice it. But my religious beliefs that I was raised on kind of prohibited me from even going there. That was a wall. That was like, oh no, you can't do that. It's like a Ouija board thing. And and I'm definitely not into Ouija boards. We had one around in the 70s, and there was enough the bad information that we chose to not go down that path. And I'm glad I didn't. I've heard some bad stories, so I definitely wouldn't pursue a path that way of higher knowledge. I wouldn't. And one of the reasons with the Ouija board is that they seem to be inviting any energy. I just want to get a message, any message. Well, there's a lot of souls and a lot of energy on the other side that is discontent, that is not resolved, and they could deceive you. So the first thing you need to do that I would recommend to anyone is to create a shield of protection around yourself, and a shield of protection around those that you're working with, because everything that you do in this universe, you are affecting. It's your energy, number one, and then the energy that you're pushing out is affecting things around you. So whenever I'm working with the Akashic Records, I'm working for the highest good of the individual, and the highest good of everyone connected to that individual. So you're setting that intent and you're protecting. Let only the message that is good for this individual, not just any message, the message this person needs to hear to move forward in a positive way, and let them be protected from all other negative energies. And one of the negative energies is not necessarily an energy that is a ghost or a being or a bad thing. It's you. It's me. Okay. So one of the things that we say in the protection prayer is relieve me from all sense of self. Don't let this be about me. Don't let this be contrived in my mind. Let this be from I'm asking specific beings, the masters, teachers, and loved ones for this individual. And that's what's most important. You're setting the intent. You're asking specific beings. You're not asking just anything to come out of the Ouija board, right? Right. If I open my front door, potentially bad things could walk in my front door of my house. So I don't do that, right? I tell people, and it's not easy being a homeowner sometimes with your kids. I have told certain friends of my kids, I said, you know what? I don't want to see you around here anymore. I don't want you to come around here. Don't come around here. And I can use real life experience that mimics or the echoes what you should do when you're working with higher levels of energy or different dimensions of energy. It's not hard. Just tell them you don't want them to be around you.
Right.
No, you guys go away. We don't want you around here, right? And they'll get it. They have to stay away. And some of their staying away is going to be your positive energy, but you don't have to be any major wizard. All you have to do is just say, we don't need that around here. So does that answer the question?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. And I like that, the tangent you just went on, because the many stories I have started with the Ouija board when it comes to investigations. So I also have issues with the Ouija board because if people don't know what they're doing, they are welcoming in the potential for all sorts of things to go wrong. So yes. And I actually say at least one prayer of protection every day just to go through life, because I do not want negativity around me. I just want to fill my life with positive things and love.
I agree. And that's one of the things I had to overcome, because I'm from North Carolina, and I'm from that, and rednecks are not closed-minded people, but you could put that kind of wrapper around some closed-mindedness. And I definitely had some of that. I was like, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, oh, do you think you'll ever be a Akashic Records master and a Reiki master? I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure no. And I'll bet you some money if you want to bet some money. But, but the truth of it is I am now, and I'm very glad that I am. And there's a magic part to there's a living magic part to all this, me. Because after my wife passed, I fell into a state of, I could not walk. I could not feel from my knees, and I could down to my feet, and I could not move my feet. And through the healings, things that I learned that I did for other people, I didn't do it for me. I did it for other people. I am now running marathons on a regular basis. I just finished a 31-mile Hanging Rock to Pilot Mountain for the second time. 2 weeks. And if you would have asked me that back then, I thought I was on death's door back in 2009. I was like, I just can't do it. I don't have any energy. I can't even move my feet right, And but coming from there to where I am now, that's miraculous. It's when I say it's a miracle, it is a miracle. Yeah. But I will say that the things that I learned from then to now have definitely contributed to my improvement and to my health and life, because it is a vast different. I'm a different person than I was back then. So talk about a spiritual awakening. That's part of it. And It took a disaster losing someone very close to me in my life. And maybe that's part of that soul circle that people describe, that you have a circle of souls that you travel across time with. And here's one of the things that I love, and this is one of the reasons that I learned so many things. I'm always like, if there's like something to learn, I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that, maybe. And we can all do anything we want to do. We may not be the shining star. We don't know. You don't even know what you're capable of if you never try it.
Right.
But if you're interested in it, you should try it. And it, to some reasonable degree. I mean, look at William Shatner. He was on a TV show, okay, and now he just actually went into space. Right. This is great. This is like I bet he never thought that would really happen when he was sitting in Hollywood. He was like, yeah, we're on a TV set, whatever, and now he went into space. Really? Okay. That means that any of us can. Any of us can do anything that we want to do. And I'm going to give you another example of that in a minute. I want to be able to stay on track with your questions, though.
No, you're doing fine. So you've said that you've used the Akashic Records to heal people or help them heal. What exactly, like when you access the Akashic Records, what kind of information do you get that is able to heal people? Like how does that process work?
Okay, so the Akashic Records, I'm glad you asked that, because when I started learning metaphysical energies and how to work with them, and this is like for me, like when we went into a meditation, and my Reiki teacher would say, "Okay, we're going to connect to this energy, and we're going to do a healing." Now, I know that you asked me about the Akashic Records, so I'm going to talk about Reiki for a second.
I got you.
So we would open up the energy for Gaia or God energy to be brought to the healing of this individual. And but you might feel something else, and you might get other intuitive messages. And so I was like, well, that's interesting. And so that's what led me to taking archangelic light. And sure enough, the archangels, they're out there too. You can sense them. When you're in a doing a healing, you're like, oh, okay, well, there's definitely something there. I don't necessarily, I can't draw a picture of it. I could draw a picture of it, but it's maybe a little amorphous, but I know that there's an energy there, right? And I know that there was multiple types of energy that were they weren't saying words to me, but that were speaking to me, that were flowing through me. And so that's what led me on to, when I had the opportunity for the Akashic Records, and I'd already done the George Bernard CD series with meditation and already started to begin that process. So I had a concept of what was going on. And so that in itself, the George Bernard process helped me to gain a better ability to connect with the Akashic Records. So when I do a session with someone to do Akashic Records messages, not necessarily, it's all about healing, because the more you learn about why things are affecting you in the way that they do now, then if you become aware of them, then you can begin to say, I either like that, what I see, that's something I need to work with, or it's something I need to work on. And if it's something you need to work on, well, you've got a Reiki master and an archangelic light master that can help bring that healing energy in and then lift it out of you, right? I'm just a conduit. I'm not a magician. I'm just, you learn a technique. If you learn how to play the piano, eventually you can play a tune and it will sound pretty good, right? Anybody can sit down at a piano, they can play one note, and that one note might sound good on its own. You might pick out two keys and you might start playing two keys, and next thing you know, you're playing chopsticks, right? Well, chopsticks is good for a while, but after a while you want to hear something other than chopsticks. Right? So the same goes with the Akashic Records and the way that I connect with people. And I had to take it in a simple way because I'm gifted in the desire to learn, and everything takes repeated work to develop a skill. And so I was like, in my first training with the Akashic Records, I came out of it with, well, I've learned them, but how do I know it's real? So then the person that you mentioned who is local, I had an opportunity to take the classes with them. Her name is Rebecca Helgeson, and she has done a lot of work with the Dancing Moon, and she's a wonderful person. And she gave me my second look at the Akashic Records techniques, also using the Linda Howe method and the pathway prayer process. And we went into it a little bit deeper. And when the words were said, and it is, the message you get is real because you have done the process. You have learned it. You've executed it. It is real. Just like if you use a Ouija board and invite any kind of spirit in, any kind of spirit might come in, right?
Yeah.
We didn't do it. That's not how you do the Akashic Records. You're asking the masters, the teachers, and the loved ones. And I'll tell you some of the explanations of who those are in just a second. But I've got a deck of cards that I found. I have many decks, and there's angel cards. There's all kinds of prophetic type cards that you can get. And one of the reasons that, and I did a little research into why do cards work? Why do cards work? Right? Well, they're mathematical, and it has to do with math. And I won't go into all the math portions of it, but the number of cards and the number symbols on the cards, it has an effect. So when I use these Akashic tarot cards, I don't use them specifically to give you a tarot reading. I use them so that I can kind of get us warmed up into, I open your Akashic Records, and then I deal out 3 cards and I turn them over one at a time. And the images on the cards kind of get things started a little bit, right? And then after we do the reading, which is very short usually, I'll go into a bit of meditation and try to get a better read, asking the masters, teachers, and loved ones for this individual, what is the message? And I base it on what the person's intentions are. What do they need to know? A lot of people want to know yes, no answers. Does so-and-so love me? When will I get married? When will I win the lottery? I wish I could tell you, but I can tell you that that's not what the Akashic Masters are interested in giving you. They'll give you the information you need now, today, to help you move forward in your universal process of development. That's what they're doing. So,
what's an example of a message that you've gotten? Like, you don't have to tell the whole backstory for the person, but what is just a kind of a specific example of what kind of message you get?
Okay. So some of the messages I get will kind of have been along the lines of, you will be traveling. I see a desert. I see you going to a desert type resort, and they're like, yeah, we're planning to go to Arizona in the fall or whatever. And I'm like, okay. And some of it is kind of I'm not trying to coerce messages, but I am trying to help you understand them. Sometimes you'll get a message and you won't know what it's about. You're like, that's the ones that baffled me at first. I was like, well, this can't be right. They just showed me a big ball of light, or they showed me a message I have gotten more than once. They're nature messages. And I think one of the reasons that I get nature messages is because I hike in the woods so much. When you're running for a long way in the woods, what you see are roots, rocks, roots, rocks, roots, rocks, dirt, roots, rocks, dirt. And you look up, you see some trees, and then you see the sky. And you suddenly get lost, and that is a meditative process. And you get lost in that. And that's when the magic happens. I do angel walks where I ask the angels, I said, please, I ask them, I say, please take me where I need to go, show me what I need to see, and help me do what I need to do. And I will find a feather. I'll be running along, and boom, like this last run I did, I found this huge feather. It turned out to be a turkey feather. I put it in my thing. I was running this race, and everybody was running by and say, hey, nice turkey feather. And I was like, great, I've got a turkey feather. It must mean I'm a turkey, right? But that's not what it means. What a turkey feather means is abundance. It's about that you're entering a time of abundance. I did some research on it, right? So you ask for messages from nature, and then they come to you, and then they're there. This is an example. This necklace. This is a ruby record keeper, and so a record keeper is tied to the Akashic Records. So it is because there is a triangular shape and it is repeated on there. The ruby is known to help you evolve your Akashic messages. So tonight, before we did your talk, I opened my records, and so they're open right now. I decided to wear this necklace. I actually wrapped this necklace. This was given to me by a friend who knew that I did the Akashic Records. And they said, this stone spoke to me and said, I needed to give it to you. And I said, okay, well, so I kept the stone. And I didn't have anything to put it in, or I kept it in my pocket, and it needed something. And I got some wire, and I did this wire. And I didn't specifically have a design. All I was trying to do was wrap it so I could hang it from a necklace around my neck.
Right.
Well, the shape appears to be a person holding something in his arm and delivering it out. So he has something and he's giving it, right?
Yeah.
That's what I see. And I was like, wow. Now, and this is it just kind of came out from just wrapping it. I'm not a stone wrapper, but I did wrap a few after that. I was like, well, this might be my new thing for life, but it's not. I can do it. But this is a one of a kind, and it certainly does help me get messages.
Yeah, I had noticed it because for the listeners, I do my recordings on Zoom, so I can see Smith, and I had noticed the necklace, but I didn't comment on it because, just because that's who I am. I notice things, but I don't necessarily say anything about it. But it's a very cool stone, and I do see the image that you see in it. So very, very cool.
Cool.
Yeah. And I forgot what I was going to say.
So you were asking about the types of messages.
Yes.
And,
types
so
of messages.
I've seen oftentimes when I go into a meditation, it starts very simply. I'll either see sand. I say, I see sand. I said, I see a light. And now I see, and it might be a boat, and then it might be this, but it evolves. The picture evolves. So I'll tell you what I see. What it means, we can discuss it. And if it's ringing a bell with you, that's great. If it's not ringing a bell with you, it may later. So just hold on to it. They're all important messages. And if you connect to the Akashic Records, I can tell you it's for real. It's just a matter of how will it evolve and how will it be manifested. It may have already manifested. It may be happening in your life now. So it's from all those angles, but I can tell you that the belief that it is real is what makes it real, and that I am sincerely doing this for you, and that I'm using a proven process. That's how it's real.
Okay, that makes sense. So you said that you could tell us a bit about who it is that you're connecting with.
Yes, I sure can. So there can be some multiple descriptions of who the masters, teachers, and loved ones are. And I certainly have what I was trained on, but I saw some ones that really rang a bell with me. And they are consistent with what I've been taught. So the masters, so first of all, the Akashic Records are protected by a group of non-physical light beings called the Lords of the Records, and that is in the Linda Howe pathway process prayer that you use. You ask the Lords of the Records. Lords of the Records, these beings ensure the safety and integrity of the records. They determine who can access the records and what information they can receive, because like I said, they're not going to tell you just everything. They're going to tell you what's for your greatest and higher good at that time. The Lords of the Records work with the masters, the teachers, and the loved ones. So master are non-physical beings that have been with you through every lifetime, guiding you and your soul on its journey. So again, that kind of gets into the recurring lives, that you've lived multiple lives. There's a book, Many Lives, Many Masters, that is a good book. This is the one that I was taught with, that I read with Linda Howe, the Akashic Records. This is the first book when I did a reading with Sherry Dillard, a local psychic, and that was one of the things that really kickstarted my training, got me interested. I was like, I've got to know more.
Yeah, the book is Discover Your Psychic Type. Again, audio, so I just want to make sure the listeners know what you held up. I have the same book on my bookshelf. I don't even remember when I got it. It was probably 15 or 20 years ago.
Okay. The teachers. So as you would imagine, they're teachers through your lifetimes, and they can include famous figures. Washington. They form themselves, or they are these spirit beings. And it's my belief sometimes that they present themselves in ways that their character will get their message across. Like if Washington spoke to you, why would Washington speak to you? Why would Lincoln speak to you? Why would, an ancient queen or an ancient Egyptian queen or something like, why would they be speaking to me? So they carry with them a character based on who that they are. Your loved ones are from your soul family. They're from your family bloodline. They're from, like, it might be your grandmother, your grandfather, an uncle, an aunt. I've seen these. These are, they come to you and they come to me, like now in my regular life, my everyday life, if I get a feeling I'm remembering my aunt, I'm like, why am I remembering my aunt? Hey, is that you out there, Aunt Naomi? Yeah, because she was definitely good to us. And I said, hey, I just wanted to say hey. And sometimes I think about my dad. He's been gone for a long time. I was like, oh, is my dad around here? Oh, Dad, I just wanted you to know I love you. You can talk to these people anytime. They miss you. They love you. They're waiting to help you. The angels are up there waiting to help you. All you have to do is ask, right? And it is not contradictory for me I'm not a highly religious person. I'm a spiritual person.
Yeah.
And I'm seeking the evolving of my spirit, and I'm seeking it with my highest power. So I'm not looking for multiple power. I answer to one, but there are many that can help you. So I say that is to clarify who I am and what I am.
That makes sense. So I have another question here. Is there any danger in accessing the Akashic Records? Like, could the information you can access be used for manipulation, or is it that's just not the way it works?
So I'm glad you asked that question. So one could think, okay, so we live in, it seems like sometimes a power hungry world, like if I have more power than this other person, that I'll control the world. I had somebody ask me that question, not about the records, but it was about money and about the current state of things or whatever. And I said, if you get a more universal view of our universe, I guess, as opposed to looking at this world is a great manifestation of energies, right? It's a physical manifestation of some energies. We are souls with a human body. We're not a human body with souls, right? The body will go away, but the soul will continue.
Right.
And what is, sometimes people talk about heaven and hell. Hell would be if you just don't ever evolve. If you're stuck in the same mindset that never evolves into a greater sense of love and connectivity to the whole universe. We're all connected. everything is connected, everything.
Yeah.
And the more you can get connected, and it's almost like it almost seems like a matrix thing. It's like, and once you take all the wrappers off of everything, and you see it's all energy. It's just energy interacting, and it's great. And you don't want to get lost in that energy. I don't want to just fizzle out, like in Terminator, where the thing dissolved into the metal. I don't want to do that. I want to be part of it, moving with it. Right. I want to be dancing. I'm not a good dancer, but I certainly feel like I dance better with the energy of my life than I ever have. And I'm not sure if that answered your question or not.
Oh, well, the question is, could it be used for, or could the information you access be used for manipulation?
Anybody can take a knife and decide to cut some bread with it, or do some damage with it, right?
Right.
But I think that it's limited with the Akashic Records, because the masters, the teachers, and the loved ones, and more importantly, and most importantly, the lords of the records are not going to allow the information to be used in a negative way. Now, you can take anything and turn it into a weapon. Like, I can take a pencil and make it a weapon. I can take a coffee cup and make it a weapon. But you're only going to be able to do, you'll be limited to the type of damage you do. Now, that the waves that you make with the information that you have, that's an echo and an imprint on your soul path. So if you do negative things with it, well, you're going to eventually have to come to terms with those and to work them out. I make sometimes I have talked, and I know it could be sensitive for some, talking about Hitler. How bad he was. He was at a bad manifestation of his soul. I don't know where he is now. Maybe he's worked some of that out. He's not here now. Now, can bad energy still be manifested and exist? Yes. Sometimes what's bad is in the light of what light is cast on it. One of the early things that was revealed to me when I was beginning my spiritual path was the Mobius strip. And why did I become fascinated with the Mobius strip? Do you know what the Mobius strip is?
I don't.
It's a three-dimensional mathematical representation. It looks like the figure 8, but it's a plane. So it's a one-sided object. If you follow the figure 8 shape, it only has one side. And so that very much related to the path that you walk when you're walking on a vibrational history of your life. And if you hold that figure 8 shape up to the light, you'll see that as you walk the single path that goes up and down and around, and it's only one path, you just take a flat sheet of paper, do a half twist, and touch it to itself, you will have a Mobius strip. But if you see how the light shines on it, your path goes through light, and it goes through dark, and it goes through light, and it goes through dark, and it goes around and around, and you keep going around learning as you go. And that's a lot what I do when I run my runs in the woods. I'll run them frontwards. I'll run them backwards. I've run from this place, that place. And if you look at nature, there is really no forwards and backwards. It's just from point to point, right?
Right.
But on the Mobius strip, you keep going. And I wrote about this. This is part of my writing. And it was so funny because at the beginning, when I was doing my writing, I would go to bars and I would sit and I would have a glass of wine and I would write, and I'd try to talk to people about metaphysical concepts. People in bars do not want to talk about metaphysical concepts, let me tell you. And they will actually become somewhat offended, and they won't ask you to leave. I mean, as long as you're spending money, you're okay. But you really don't make that many friends there. So I had to find the right people to be around so that I could have a good conversation. And thank you for having me here.
Yeah. No, this is part of the reason I have this podcast, is so that people can talk about these things, or it can start conversations among friends who say, "Hey, I listened to this episode. You should listen to it too," so we can talk about it. So what do you think is the coolest, like the most amazing, profound experience you've had so far And I kind of think I might know what the answer is, but you could surprise me. So I'm asking.
Okay, yeah. There's multiple ones. One of the some of the things come from the I will never and I can't. Okay, so those two words, if you a wise man will say, I don't even know what a wise man say, but I've come to know there's no reason to say I will never do this and I can never do that. One of my stories to people, and is about the Akashic Records. I was at work working 12-hour shifts, and I was mostly by myself. And I would find myself walking around in this 12-hour period. And I do lots of different things at the print company. So I'm making plates or I'm working on files. But I was walking and I was kind of tired, working 12 hours on your feet. It can be tiresome. But one of the things that was going through my head, was that I wonder, could I ever fly? And I was in a psychic group one night. I was in a meditation group, and they said, "Well, what do you want to meditate? What's the thing that you would want to do with your psychic power one day?" And I said, "Well, I said, this is going to sound a little crazy." I said, "But we are in a kind of an open group." I said, "I always wanted to fly." And they said, "Oh, that's great. You mean fly to like Europe and give classes and do sessions and stuff?" And I said, "No, I was thinking more of just flying." And they're like, "You mean like around the room, like with wings and stuff?" And I'm like, "Well, maybe not the wings, maybe just fly." And so I can tell you that group got quiet quick. There's like, "All right, Smith, that's wonderful. Have a good day." Right. So years go by and I'm walking around, like I said, on a 12-hour shift, and I was a little tired. So kind of move my arms, just kind of shake out some of the tightness. And I realized, I said, that's kind of like flying. And I said, you know what? This earth is spinning at thousands of miles an hour. We're flying through space at incredible speeds through the galaxy and the universe, right? I'm already flying. I'm flying right now, and you are too, right? And now I can't feel wind. To say the misconception is that I'll feel wind going across my arms. I don't, right?
Right.
But I am, and you are flying through the universe at incredible speeds that you could not even imagine. So it was solved. And I wrote it in my book. I said, answer to question. You're already flying, right? So, right. And I know people will give you a hard time. They'll say, "Oh, well, you're taking it out of what you meant was, doesn't matter what I meant. The answer was right there. The answer." And that was one of the first messages I wrote to myself when I started keeping a journal after my wife died, is, what is the answer to my purpose? It's right in front of you. It's right there in front of you. And I wrote it over and over again. And I said, how can it be right in front of me? I was writing it the whole time. Right? Those are the messages. That's the incredible things, like seek and you will find.
That is amazing. Well, thank you so much for spending your time talking to me about the Akashic Records. Is there any way that somebody, if they wanted to get more information or get a reading from you, like how would they get in touch with you?
I'm a co-chair of the Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship. They can reach me through that group. They can reach me through my email, which is, can I say my email?
Sure.
Yes, it is my last name, Primm, Primm, 2 M's, 50S. So Primm50s@gmail.com.
Okay. And I'll put a link to the Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship. I knew that. My brain just blanked as I was saying it. I'll put a link to the group on the show notes so that anybody who is listening right now can just take a look at the show notes on their favorite podcast app and tap on that and go straight to the group's website. So
excellent. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you again. This has been really good. And I feel like I learned a lot tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks again to Smith for taking time to talk with me today, and thank you for listening. If you have an idea for a show topic, you can fill out the contact form at peeppodcast.com. That's PEEP podcast.com. Remember, that stands for People Experiencing Everyday Paranormal. If I can find a study about it, I'll be happy to use it. Special thanks to the listeners who have submitted topic ideas. Also, if you're interested in sharing your own personal stories of paranormal experiences, I'd love to have you on the show. It can be as anonymous as you'd like. You can keep up with the show on its Facebook page, facebook.com/peeppodcast. We also have a group linked from that page in case you're interested in joining the conversation. If you like the podcast, please give it some rating love on your favorite podcast app, share it with friends, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Doing so will help the podcast be found by others. Special thanks to everyone who has given the show some love. I really appreciate it. The Peep podcast is 100% free to enjoy, but it's not free for me to create. So like many other independent podcasters, I'll happily accept donations. If you're interested in supporting the show financially, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Nicole Maroc. The Patreon account still exists, but Buy Me a Coffee doesn't require a monthly commitment. All donations will be received with extreme gratitude. No matter how you support the show, listening, telling others about it, financial assistance, or any other way, I always appreciate you being here. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe and be well.